Hello and welcome, I am Arumba. Thank you for joining me. Let's talk about the 1.7 patch for Europa Universalis IV. So the patch notes just came out. This is it's called the Res Publica DLC. And with that is the 1.7 patch. So there are quite a few features. And before we really dive in and talk about how these are all going to affect gameplay, I just wanted to mention something that's been going on in the forums and then also on the subreddit, both Paradox Plaza and the EU4 subreddit. You know, there's a lot of people who are really being rude, I think, to the developers over at Paradox and disagreeing with their, like, vision of what the game should be and being, frankly, kind of childish about the game. And I want to just put my opinion out there so that people kind of know where I stand on the issue. I think Paradox is doing a fantastic job. I think that they are listening to their players. They are trying to make the game better. I do agree that their vision of the game is a bit different than mine, right? But it's not my game. It's not my choice. It's theirs. And, you know, it's not like you can just complain and say that it's not fair and whine and cry and kick and scream. It's just not how it works. If you don't like the way that the game is playing, then there are mods, or you could play a different game. Maybe you have a different game in mind that you are trying to play and you want this game to be more like it. Well, guess what? Crusader Kings 2 is different than EU4. Crusader Kings 2 is more roleplay focused than EU4 is, and I don't know. I think people need to soften up a bit here on their feedback to the developers and not be so critical. Like, the big rub in this patch was the truce timer change. And I would have to wager that probably 75% or more of the people who were complaining about the truce timers hadn't even loaded up the game and tried it before they started spewing their vile hatred about the change. And the fact of the matter is that it doesn't really affect gameplay very much. And, you know, you just gotta... Everything changes with time. Everything. And you just have to understand that it might not be the same way that it was last patch, or it might not be the way that you want it to be, but it's changing for a reason. There's a reason for it. And I do hope that in the future Paradox will make peacetime a little bit more interesting. I think that was the main rub. I mean, my main issue with it, the reason why I at first thought that this wasn't a good change, is because, you know, when you make a change like that, and you make it so they can't go to war as often with your direct neighbors, then yeah, if you have nothing to do during peacetime, you're just cutting some of the fun of the game out. But I have a feeling that eventually we're going to see peace become more interesting once the game is balanced. And anyway, let's go over the patch notes, and you guys can tell me what your thoughts are. You can agree with me, you can disagree with me. You're allowed to have your opinion. I just wanted to let you know what my opinion was, and I say, you know, lighten up a bit, right? It's just a game, a very, very good game. It's provided me with hundreds and hundreds of hours of entertainment, and I think that it's a good game. So, without further ado then, let's talk about the paid features. So, it's $5. It's only $5, and I'm sure we'll see it go on sale at some point in the near future. There's some unique mechanics for Dutch Republics, landing the Orangists versus the Statists. Now, I have not actually loaded up the Dutch Republic to give this a shot, but that is it's definitely a big focus of this patch, is having unique flavor type stuff for the Dutch Republics. So like Netherlands and all that. Merchant Republics can now place trade posts in each trade node to boost their trade power. This just allows Merchant Republics to have even more of a trade focus. The new diplomatic action against elective monarchies to support heirs of own dynasty in that realm, giving power, prestige, and legitimacy bonus if they win. So you can basically try to put your dynasty on other monarchies. So if a government form is an elective monarchy, then there's a potential for more personal unions, more inheritances, some more interesting mechanics with that. So again, hopefully over time we see some more clarity when it comes to the way that personal unions and inheritances work, because it's very, very cloudy right now. New action for elective monarchy itself to support their own noble for the throne. Lots of new events for Dutch republics, merchant republic factions, elective monarchies, and dictatorships. Dictatorships are now special cases in a republic when tradition goes too low, and they last for the rest of that ruler's life. And national focus, change priority on power from 3 in each category to +5 in one and +2 in the others. Now, honestly, I would say that this is the most significant change in the DLC, the best justification for picking it up. I mean, if you like monarchies, elective monarchies and republics and all that stuff, this stuff's cool, but the national focus is really, really, really nice. Like, what this does, let's say that you have, maybe you're ahead of time on military technology, and you're trying to knock out both an administrative idea group, and you're trying to keep up on administrative technology. You know how hard that is. Administrative technology and, administrative points are so scarce that you're just constantly always running out. And maybe your ruler comes up and he's got two administrative points and 5 military and 5 diplomacy. Well, basically, you're able to balance out your bad heroes or your bad rulers, and just kind of give you more of what you want to have. Or in certain circumstances, maybe you have a really good guy, just good all over. But you can still push it in the direction that you're trying to lead the country, and this lasts until your ruler dies. So I don't really think, in my experience so far, it's not been an issue where like your desire to change focus is so frequent that you are wishing your guy would die or anything like that. But it's very, very useful. I'm very happy to see something like that in the game, because I've always hated the randomness of it, you know? Like, how many times have you been in a situation where you're so far ahead in one technology and you're just like, well, I guess I'm going to culture convert because I have nothing to spend these points on. There's nothing to do with them. And now you can balance it out so that doesn't happen quite as much. And then that brings us to our free features. These came with the 1.7 patch, and they are just automatically built in. Elections now used scaled Republican tradition. So what this means is that it's not just going to be a flat 10 Republican tradition to vote for the same character. It now depends based on how frequent your election cycles are. So it kind of averages out the different types of Republican government forms and makes it so that one isn't superior to the other when it comes to like getting high value, high point rulers. Added oligarchic republic as a new basic Republican government form. The new category of dictatorship is added that is treated as a republic if res publica is not enabled. So I think most people are going to get this DLC. It's very inexpensive. Merchant republics no longer get bonus 10 trade power. Constitutional monarchy lost the prestige decay bonus and instead has -5 years of nationalism. Now, this is something that's going to come up in a few minutes when we talk about the new idea groups, but anything that reduces nationalism I think is really, really valuable. Right now you get like a default of 15 years of nationalism when you conquer something, and that starts you off at 15% revolt risk and scales down as the nationalism goes away. So when you reduce revolt risk, you reduce nationalism by 5, you're actually also reducing the revolt risk as well, which is a very significant change. It's kind of like in Crusader Kings 2, where you have the short reign bonus, you know? When you can take legalism and reduce your short reign penalty, it's just huge, and this works basically the same way. Enlightened despotism no longer gets -5% core cost, but instead -10% accepted culture threshold. So, if you're not familiar with accepted cultures, the way that the game handles culture is it will say, all right, in order for your culture, a culture, to be accepted, it either needs to be one of the defined cultures that are just always accepted no matter what. Like when you do a national country, like a folk, like make Italy or something, certain cultures will just be accepted. But to get any other culture accepted, they have to have at least 20% of your tax income total. And it's not, again, tax income, not production, not trade, just tax income. Once you get above 20%, that culture becomes an accepted part of your country, and it will stay as part of your country, and you just have no penalties, no problems on manpower or income. And as long as I think it's either 5% or 10%, as long as you keep it above, just assume maybe it's 10%, then it'll stay accepted even if you dip below 20%. So when it says that they no longer get 5% reduced core cost, but instead -10% accepted culture threshold, that is going to take it from 20% to 18%. Which might not seem like a big difference, but it does make a big difference, especially when you look at, again, one of the ideas that's going to come up soon. Administrative republics lost their tolerance bonuses and instead got -10% culture conversion cost and -5 years on nationalism. Again, we've already talked about how great that is. Republics no longer become monarchies at 0 Republican tradition. Instead, they have a chance to become a dictatorship if they fall below 40, with a chance depending on how low it is. Now, this is similar to the degradation of the Republic that we saw in my other playthroughs, where you don't it's not like it just happens right away. You have events that'll fire that will say, like, we need a king, and like you kind of can control the descent depending on what you want to have happen. Merchant republics now have 3 different factions: aristocrats, traders, and guilds. So this is just merchant republics. I don't believe this applies to the other forms of republic. Like if you're a noble republic, I don't believe that you get these 3 guilds, or these 3 different factions. It's a very simple faction system. If you have lots of military tradition, then you're going to trend towards one of the 3. I can't remember which one's which. If you have lots of naval tradition, you're going to trend towards traders. And if you have, the other one's just kind of the other one. And what you do is you spend just a very small amount of points to push, kind of support one of the 3 factions. And depending on which faction has the most support, then you get certain bonuses, like goods produced nationally, or reduced naval ship maintenance, increased trade power, increased morale, that kind of thing. So it's just another way it's a little bit more flavor for merchant republics. I think most of the time people are going to just focus on trade. And then I think the guilds also reduce build cost, not admin point, not monarch points, but another 10% reduction in cost is kind of cool. Countries that become dictatorships will return to their previous government form when the dictator dies. Now, I don't know if that's really true, though, because when I was reading about this in the forum, somebody had a republic, it became a dictatorship, and then when that happened, they became a kingdom. They didn't go back to being a republic, which this says that you will go back to the previous government form, but it didn't seem to work that way. It could just be the way that that player handled it. We'll experiment, I'll experiment, and see how that goes. Remove the legitimacy penalty for changing governments. Military removed manpower impact from production size to be tied to increased by 5% from each military tech. So this is really, really, really good, right? The 1.6 patch, France was just incredibly overpowered. And the reason for that is they changed the way that goods produced was calculated relative to base tax. So if you don't remember, the way that it used to be, it was you had your base tax, and then what it would do is it would take 1 plus 0.01 times base tax. And then that would be multiplied by goods produced. Or that was just like your goods produced number. So you'd end up with, like, say you had 5 base tax, then it was 1.05 times goods produced. Like, so just 5% more, barely anything. If you had a 15 base tax province, it'd be 15% more. And then in patch 1.6, they changed it so that it was instead 1 plus 0.2 times base tax. And so there, and I'm sorry, it was not actually 1 plus. It's actually now 0.1 plus 0.2 times base tax. So they made it so that the base was much lower. And so like the city itself is 0.1 production. But then if you had like a base 5 base tax province, you'd have 5 times 0.2 equals 1, plus the 0.1 equals 1.1. If you had 15, now you're talking about like triple the overall amount of goods produced. As you know, goods produced affects your production like income. But what they also had it do is that base goods produced affected your manpower. And so when they made this change to try to change the way that trade and income and all that stuff kind of worked, they kind of in an unplanned way just buffed the crap out of France, because France had really high average base tax. It's like 6 or 7 average base tax. That equates to about a 30 to 40% boost to France's manpower, on top of their national ideas that give them tons of manpower. So when they've made this change now, where manpower impact from production size is gone, and it's instead tied to military tech, this basically completely removes the bonus that France had, while still maintaining the trade and production income type changes that they were shooting for before. And another side effect of this, though, is that manpower pools in general get much, much bigger the later into the game that you get, which is an interesting change. In general, I think it's a good thing, because you're going to see bigger armies, bigger fights, and I don't know, it's interesting. It'll just be something different. I didn't really notice a huge increase in manpower until you get to like, 16 or 1700. Ships trying to break a blockade to flee a port will now return back to that port if defeated. Okay. So you can't just like run them into a fight and then retreat them back to another place. They will automatically stay in port. So fleets are easier to kill if you can catch them and force them. You say you have a big strong navy, you force them into a port, and then you come siege that port, you can just beat the crap out of them and they can't run away. Fleets attempting to break blockades will, if they retreat retreat back to court. Did I just read that? I swear that's in there twice. Can no longer detach blockade fleets with 0 subunits. That's good. I'm glad to see that some of that buggy stuff was there. It's just a bug fix, really. A null treaty now lasts 10 years. So this is referring to, let's say you're at war with somebody, and you say, okay, you can't be friends with that guy anymore. No more alliance, no more anything. Now it's 10 years, up from 5. Truce length now scales to the amount of war score taken in the peace, from 5 years at white peace to 15 years at 100% war score. So this was the big hot item in the patch, and in practice, what this usually works out to is about a 6 to 7, maybe an 8-year truce timer, unless you actually push them all the way to 100%, in which case it's 15 years. And there's plenty of workarounds, right? It's not the end of the world. If you declare war on the target's ally and they get the defensive call, then that truce is no longer valid, and you can go to war with them earlier. If there's a coalition, you can declare war on new coalition members. The coalition will respond. You're at war with them earlier. If you declare war on a protectorate, and the protectorate wasn't involved in the war with their overlord, then you can go to war with the overlord again. Like, there's all kinds of ways to work your way around it. And even then, all that it really does is just make you spread out, you know, just attack on multiple fronts, and it gives you more time to recover. Call for peace is now applied to all attackers, so that's fine. What that is where if you've had the war goal for a very long period of time, like 2 or 3 years, and you're just pounding away at somebody, that you get a ticking war exhaustion that starts building up. Starts at 0.01 per month, then goes up by 0.01 every month until you end the war. So if you go a year into the war, then you're accumulating like 0.12 war exhaustion every month. And then the next month, 0.13, and then 0.14. It just grows and grows and just forces you into piecing out. Winning an independence war no longer gives imperial authority. I don't think it ever should have. Merchant republics now have a slightly harder time diplo-vassalizing. Merchant republics are now very difficult to diplo-vassalize. You can now diplo-vassalize without having a royal marriage. Fantastic. There's a lot more opportunity now for wrong religion vassalization. You can do that now because you don't have to have the royal marriage. You used to not be, if you were Catholic, you couldn't royal marry a Sunni, and so there was no opportunity for diplo-vassalization. If you were a republic, you couldn't do it because you couldn't get a royal marriage unless you were a noble republic or one of the other ones that lets you do it. So it just opens up more opportunities. Same thing with the what are they called? Theologians? Not theologians. You know what I'm talking about, like the bishoprics. They can now do diplo-vassalization as well. Having a royal marriage now gives a bonus to acceptance, so there is still a benefit if you can, but it's not necessary. You can no longer use claim throne on countries with a different dynasty. I think this is actually more of a bug fix, yeah, right? There was like 6 different possible scenarios where you could use claim throne, and like 1 or 2 of them never made sense to do. You just should never do it. And I think this is the one that they've changed. So they just made it so you can't do it because you couldn't possibly benefit from doing it. So there was no reason to even make it an option. Claiming the throne of a different dynasty, like you can't even put them into a union, I believe. Enforced peace option will now properly account for current wars and will be disabled if they cannot join the war. It will also tell the reason why. So, will be disabled if they cannot join the war. So I'm supposing that if they cannot join the war. I'm not really sure exactly what that means, but I don't know. We'll see. Opinion malice for different religion is now reduced by positive tolerance. Native vassals migrating will make Overlord discover that province. So if you actually vassalize like a Native American OPM, then if they migrate away, then you don't just lose your vassal. Selling provinces now results in the seller getting inflation at the same rate as from gold taken in peace. War exhaustion loss calculation from peace deals is no longer 100 times what it should be. Oops. Fixed an issue when offering renouncing cores in a peace offer, which would cost diplo points for the renouncer instead of the person who was demanding it. Having a regency council will no longer prevent independence wars. Declaring independence will no longer give massive aggressive expansion. And the minimum relations to support independence is now -125. Or sorry, -25. So it's much easier to support independence, which is good. In the HRE, elector vassals are now considered under the control of the overlord is in alliance. The wording on some of these is just nuts, but interesting, okay. Imperial authority is no longer gained when princes convert to the emperor's religion, and it is again lost when they convert away. This seems to me like maybe a bit harsh of a change, because it used to be that you could enforce religion and you could keep them in your religion and you'd gain imperial authority, and that was kind of one of the ways you'd build it up. Now you don't get it back, you don't gain it for converting them, and then you still lose it. So now I just think we're going to see the HRE is not going to get nearly as many reforms, and it's going to happen later in the game, which maybe is what the goal is. They want to make it harder to do. Marketplace and Canal now have +2 trade power instead of +1, and the Customs House is +10 instead of +5, and it also adds 2 trade value. Culture conversion is now twice as long as default, but culture conversion cost modifiers can reduce it for rebels. Overextension over 100% now increases revolt size by multiplying with overextension. So if I'm understanding this one correctly, I haven't experienced this yet, but let's say you have 200% overextension, then the revolt risk isn't really going to go much higher than normal, but the revolt size would be multiplied by 200%. So the bigger revolts. So again, just really punishing you for going too high on your overextension. Peasant rebels will no longer change a country's government when they win. Capped tolerance towards heretics and heathens at +3. +3 is where you get the 100% religious unity. Anyway, you're just completely tolerant of them. Conversion zeal no longer disappears on conquest of province. Okay. Hindu Republicans can now set a new deity when a new ruler has been elected. That sounds like a bug fix. Rebalanced and added decisions across religions to make sure they have similar chances to get high missionary strength. Okay, rivals. Countries that are 50% or more apart in tech speed can no longer set each other as rivals. So countries that are 50% or more can no longer set each other as rivals. So a great example would be, let's say you're looking at, what is it? I think it's the Asians, really, is where you first see that 50% penalty. So you're not going to see people rivaling each other unless they are closer in technology. So we'll see fewer rivalries that make no sense at all. However, countries that have chosen you as a rival are now always available to set as a rival. So if, for whatever reason, say you're an Italy that spans the entire world and Austria decides to rival you, then you can rival them right back and beat the snot out of them, which is what I've been doing. You can no longer buy provinces from or sell provinces to your rivals. Power projection is now added when vassalizing rivals or fully annexing them. I complained about this on day 1 of patch 1.6, so I'm very happy to see that they fixed that. I would have preferred a hot fix because I feel like it was such an obviously necessary feature. Where this usually came up is when you were very small, like you're a 1-province minor and you conquered your next door neighbor 1-province minor, and they were your rival, and because they ceased to exist, then you didn't get any power projection, which was really, really frustrating. You were actually better off, like, tormenting them than you were actually winning against them. Fixed a bug where potential rivals being calculated wrongly when handling countries with overseas provinces, and power projection will also be added when annexing rivals. Again, there's some duplication here in these things. Colonization, being bankrupt now decreases settler growth by 200, so you cannot colonize if you're bankrupt. Makes sense. You can no longer colonize provinces that are adjacent to non-core provinces if they are outside colonial range. So, this is going to slow down colonization. You have to actually finish coring things. Or you have to, like you can't just put like 5 colonies right next to each other in a row at the very edge of your limit. You'll have to wait one by one until those colonies get cored. Colonists will now be cancelled when country is annexed. Okay, the colony will belong to the annexer. Score. Implement impact of wars on the underlying monthly score, so lost wars against higher ranked countries with high peace score are bad for you, while winning wars are good. Score is something that is just a number that doesn't really matter much in the game, but it's interesting, I guess, that they're making that change. You now get a 25% penalty to your monthly score for each rival not set, up to, I would assume, 75%. Centers of trade now provide 100% more trade power and naval force limit, again, boosting up the value of trade and making republics more appealing. Countries now get plus 20% production efficiency for being ahead of time in production technology. Countries now get 20% trade efficiency for being ahead of time in diplo technology. And keep in mind, trade efficiency also affects trade income, as well as trade power, as well as lots of other things. Like, it's very, very, very good. Production efficiency, not quite so much. It increases the amount of goods that you make, and then the amount of money that you make because of that, but trade efficiency is definitely the one that's, I think, more significant. I mean, I saw a swing in my Italy campaign of like 100 ducats a month just for catching up on technology. Removed PowerPoint penalties from all tech groups. So this is not talking about the 20% or the 50% increased technology costs. It's talking about the PowerPoint penalties. So if you're sub-Saharan, you're not going to have -2 points anymore. If you're Manchu or something, Ming, you're not going to have -1 or -2 or whatever they were. Now everyone's equal because you're already penalized by the increased costs. So you used to be that you were penalized twice, now you're only penalized once. The neighbor bonus is now 5% per level and can reach up to 75% off to let late Westernizers have a chance to catch up. So this is a very significant change. This is up from 2% with a cap of, I think, 10. Now it's at 5 up to 75, so it's huge, huge discounts. There are three new idea groups: humanism, influence, and maritime. They tweaked numerous policies that were too strong or too weak, moved and removed policies to make sure that the military or the monarch point groups and idea groups have equal amounts. So what ended up happening is that naval got moved to military, and then maritime is a diplomatic one. Influence is diplomatic. So we got two these are both diplomatic. This one's administrative, and then naval moved to military. Colonial Settlement Act now gives 1 colonist instead of +10 settler growth, and Colonial Expansions now gives +10 settler growth instead of +1 colonist. Reduced legitimacy and Republican tradition from policies. Added lots of new policies connected to the new idea groups. Reworked some national ideas, moved some ideas around. Grand Army is now 20%, down from 25. National Conscripts is now 10% faster regiment recruitment speed instead of 25% global manpower. Just all in all, a number of changes to the ideas and everything. Now, the rest of this stuff I don't really want to spend a huge amount of time on because it's not as significant as the beginning, and we're already about 25-30 minutes in, so it's a very long patch. But basically, suffice to say, what's changed about the AI is that this is significant. They will no longer desire provinces if they're very, very weak, which is good. Makes it easier to vassalize people. They're actually going to save money again. They're going to build units again. That's good. Sorry, build buildings again. They will no longer assault if they're at low morale, etc., etc. There was another change in here that was very nice. There's two of them. One that I wanted to mention is that you can hold down the control key while selecting during your selection box, and it will only select ships, which is really nice. And also, they fixed the land unit hitbox, so it's no longer ginormous, which causes terrible, terrible misclicks in the Alps. And then there's some changes to modding and all that. And I think I saw some new achievements, 5 new achievements. Vasa or Wetin. Get a ruler of your dynasty on the throne of Poland while they're an elective monarchy. Sinasapel, get Orangists in power with 100% Republican tradition and owning a province in China. 1 king to rule as Poland to become an abolitionist monarchy and abolish the session. Venetian Sea, 90% trade share in Alexandria and Constantinople with less than 10 cities. And the Iron Price, restore the Danelaw to Danish rule and make it Danish culture. So, yeah, I'm not gonna, it's just too much. We've been talking about it for far too long. But the full patch notes will be in the description of this video, and also you can go read about them on the forums. I think it's a very, very good patch. Lots of great changes. Very excited to start a new campaign, and that's really all that I had to say about all that. So thank you so much for listening and watching and going over the patch notes with me. I look forward to seeing you in the next EU4 video. See you again soon.